I never expected my life to unravel over a cup of coffee and an old letter. But there I was, sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, staring at my father's handwriting while my husband Ryan packed his bags upstairs. My name is Addie, and until today, I thought I was living a perfectly normal life. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it again. My dearest Addie. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the time has come for you to know the truth. There's a debt of the heart that must be settled, one that involves the Palmers more than you could ever imagine. Don't trust their kindness. Look deeper. The answers are in the old maple desk in my study. Love, Dad. The stairs creaked, and I quickly stuffed the letter into my pocket. Ryan appeared in the doorway, 2 suitcases at his feet. His face was a mask of practiced indifference, but his eyes couldn't quite meet mine. I think that's everything, he said, his voice flat. Mother will be here tomorrow to help sort out the rest. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. Your mother? Why would Evelyn need to be involved in this? The house, Addie. She's concerned about the house. Concerned? I let out a bitter laugh. The ink isn't even dry on my father's death certificate, and you're both already circling like vultures? Ryan's jaw tightened. That's not fair. This house has been in my family for generations. Your father. My father what? I stood up so quickly, my chair scraped against the floor. Go ahead, Ryan. Tell me what my father did. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Now it just seemed calculated, like everything else about him. Look, I know this is sudden, but we both know things haven't been right for a while. The divorce papers will be ready next week. Divorce? The word felt like acid in my mouth. 3 days after my father's funeral, you're serving me with divorce papers? It's better this way, he said, reaching for his suitcases. Clean break. I watched him head for the door, my mind racing. The letter in my pocket seemed to burn against my skin. What did my father know about the Palmers? What debt was he talking about? Ryan, I called out just as he reached for the doorknob. Did you ever actually love me? He paused, his back to me. For a moment, I thought I saw his shoulders slump, a crack in his perfect facade. But when he turned, his face was composed, almost pitying. Does it matter now? The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I was alone in the house that suddenly felt too big, too empty. And filled with secrets I didn't understand. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I could trust. Jess? Can you come over? I need your help with something in Dad's study. Of course, she answered immediately. What's wrong? I looked at the letter in my hand, then toward the window where I could see Ryan's car pulling out of the driveway. I'm not sure yet. But I think my father left me a puzzle to solve, and I have a feeling the Palmers aren't going to like what I find. After hanging up, I walked to my father's study. The maple desk sat there, untouched since his death last week. Whatever secrets it held, whatever truth my father wanted me to discover, I knew one thing for certain. Ryan and his mother had picked the wrong woman to underestimate. I pulled open the first drawer and began my search. Somewhere in this desk lay the answers that would either save me or destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. And I was going to find them, no matter the cost. The sound of heels clicking on hardwood floors woke me the next morning. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when Evelyn Palmer swept into my kitchen like she owned it. Which, according to the way she was acting, she apparently did. Oh good, you're up, she said, setting down a large designer bag on my counter. We have so much to discuss about the house. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. Evelyn, you can't just. I've already called the realtor, she continued, pulling out a stack of papers. Once we get this place on the market, we can all move forward. I'm thinking we should start packing up Henry's things today. The casual mention of my father's name made my blood boil. No one is touching Dad's things. Evelyn's perfectly painted lips twitched. Darling, I know this is difficult, but you have to face reality. This house belongs to the Palmer family. Your father was merely temporary custodian. I thought about the letter in my pocket, about the mysterious debt my father mentioned. Funny how nobody mentioned that during the 12 years I've lived here. Things change. Evelyn began opening kitchen cabinets, making little disapproving sounds. Ryan tells me you're being difficult about the divorce. Just then, Jess walked in through the back door, our usual morning routine that suddenly felt like a lifeline. She took one look at the scene and crossed her arms. Mrs. Palmer, Jess said coolly. What a surprise. Evelyn's smile could have frozen hell. Jessica. I didn't realize you still dropped by unannounced. I didn't realize you had a key to this house, Jess shot back. I've always had a key. Evelyn's hand went to her neck, fingering an antique locket I'd never seen before. This house holds many memories for me. Something about the way she said it made me look closer. The locket seemed familiar somehow, like I'd seen it in an old photograph. Before I could place it, Evelyn was moving again, this time toward my father's study. Don't, I said, stepping in front of her. That room is off limits. Addison, she sighed my name like I was a child having a tantrum. You're only making this harder on yourself. Ryan has already agreed to the sale. Ryan doesn't get to decide anything anymore, I said. And neither do you. Evelyn's facade cracked slightly. You have no idea what you're dealing with, girl. Your father. My father what? I challenged, echoing my words to Ryan yesterday. What exactly did my father do, Evelyn? For a split second, something like fear flickered across her face. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment was gone. She checked the screen and gathered her things. We'll continue this discussion later, she said, heading for the door. Do try to be reasonable, Addison. Some secrets are better left buried. After she left, Jess let out a low whistle. Well, that was intense. What's really going on, Addie? I pulled out my father's letter and handed it to her. As she read it, I paced the kitchen, my mind racing. There's something in Dad's study, Jess. Something they don't want me to find. Then we better find it first, she said, handing the letter back. But that locket Evelyn was wearing, didn't your mom have one just like it? I stopped pacing. Mom's locket had disappeared after she died, when I was just a kid. Dad never talked about it, but I remembered it clearly, an antique silver oval, with a distinctive filigree pattern. The same pattern I'd just seen around Evelyn Palmer's neck. Jess, I said slowly, I think we need to do more than just search Dad's study. We need to find out exactly what happened between my parents and the Palmers 30 years ago. And what about Ryan and the divorce? I thought about my soon-to-be ex-husband, about Evelyn's thinly veiled threats, about my father's warning. They want to play hardball? Fine. But they're about to learn that I'm not the same woman who used to just smile and nod at Palmer family dinners. I headed toward my father's study, determination replacing the hurt and confusion of the past few days. Whatever truth lay hidden in that maple desk, I had a feeling it was going to change everything, for all of us. The maple desk held more secrets than I could have imagined. After 3 hours of searching with Jess, we found a false bottom in the lowest drawer. Inside was a dusty manila envelope stuffed with photographs that made my hands shake. Oh my God, Jess whispered, looking over my shoulder. Is that my father and Evelyn? I confirmed, spreading the photos across the desk. They were younger, much younger, but unmistakable. In every picture, they looked happy, in love even. The timestamps showed dates from 35 years ago, right around the time my parents would have first met. There's more, I said, pulling out a stack of letters. The paper was yellowed, but Evelyn's distinctive handwriting was clear, my dearest Henry. Before I could read further, the study door creaked. I whirled around to find Ryan standing there, his face unreadable. I thought I might find you here, he said, eyes fixed on the scattered photos. Mother warned me you'd start digging. Funny how everyone seems so concerned about what I might find. I held up one of the photos. Want to explain this? Ryan stepped closer, then stopped, something like recognition crossing his face. Where did you get my mother's locket? What? He pointed to one of the photos where Evelyn wore the same locket I'd seen around her neck earlier. That locket. It was my grandmother's. No, I said slowly, it was my mother's. I remember her wearing it when I was little. The silence that followed was deafening. Jess quietly excused herself, squeezing my shoulder as she left. Ryan picked up one of the letters, his hands trembling slightly. You need to stop this, Addie, he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Some things are better left in the past. That's exactly what your mother said. What are you both so afraid of? He crumpled the letter in his fist. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me? I laughed bitterly. By serving me divorce papers days after my father's funeral? By letting your mother try to force me out of my home? Our home, he corrected automatically, but there was something different in his tone, uncertainty, maybe even guilt. I grabbed another photo from the desk, this one showing my father and Evelyn standing in front of the house. When was this taken, Ryan? Because according to the date, your mother knew my father long before she married your father. Long before she had you. Ryan's face paled. That's impossible. She and Dad were high school sweethearts. Were they? I pressed. Or is that just another story she told you? He turned away, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture that now seemed more nervous than calculated. You don't understand what you're doing. If this gets out. If what gets out? The truth about your mother and my father? Or something else? I stepped closer, forcing him to look at me. What aren't you telling me, Ryan? For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd married, vulnerable, honest, torn. But then his phone buzzed, and just like his mother earlier, the mask slipped back into place. The realtor will be here tomorrow, he said, heading for the door. Pack what you want to keep. The rest goes to estate sale. I'm not going anywhere. He paused in the doorway. You know what's strange? When your father was dying, he asked to speak to Mother alone. She came out of his room looking like she'd seen a ghost. The next day, she insisted I file for divorce. The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone with the scattered pieces of a past I was only beginning to understand. I picked up another letter from the pile, this one dated just weeks before my parents' wedding. As I began to read, my hands started shaking again, but this time not from shock, from anger. Because there, in black and white, was proof that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. And Evelyn Palmer was at the center of it all. The realtor never made it to the house the next day. Instead, I got a call from an unfamiliar number while I was sorting through more of my father's papers. Is this Addison Palmer? The man's voice was professional, measured. This is Samuel Green, your father's notary. We need to talk. About what? About the real terms of your father's will. He paused. And about Evelyn Palmer. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Sam Green in a quiet coffee shop downtown. He looked exactly like what you'd expect from a notary, pressed suit, wire-rimmed glasses, careful movements. But there was something else in his expression. Worry, maybe. Or guilt. Your father amended his will 3 days before he died, Sam said, sliding a folder across the table. He was very specific about the timing of this revelation. I opened the folder, then nearly dropped my coffee. The documents inside showed that my father hadn't just owned our house, he'd owned the entire Palmer estate. All of it. That's impossible, I whispered. The Palmers have been living on borrowed time and your father's generosity for 30 years. Sam leaned forward. But there's more. Henry left everything to you, not Ryan. And he included this. He handed me an envelope, sealed with wax. My hands trembled as I broke the seal and read. My dearest Addie. By now you've found the photos. You know about Evelyn and me. What you don't know is that your mother's death wasn't an accident. The truth is in the locket, the one Evelyn wears like a trophy. Get it back. Finish what I couldn't. Love, Dad. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too public. What are you saying? Sam glanced around before answering. I'd been your father's notary for 20 years. He trusted me with certain documents. Insurance, in case anything happened to him. Like what? Like being pressured to change his will on his deathbed. Sam's voice hardened. Evelyn visited him that last day. She tried to force him to sign new papers. But I'd already filed the real will. My phone buzzed, a text from Jess, Ryan's here with moving trucks. Evelyn's supervising. They're taking everything. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped across the floor. They're emptying the house. They can't, Sam said firmly. As of your father's death, you own everything. Including whatever's in that locket. I rushed home to find 3 moving trucks in the driveway and Evelyn directing workers like a general commanding troops. When she saw me, her hand went instinctively to the locket. Stop, I commanded, my voice carrying across the lawn. The workers paused. Everyone out. Now. Don't be ridiculous, Evelyn snapped. Ryan, tell her. Ryan can't tell anyone anything about this house, I cut in, pulling out the documents Sam had given me. Because he doesn't own it. I do. The color drained from Evelyn's face. That's not possible. No? I stepped closer. Should we talk about what's really in that locket? About what really happened to my mother? Ryan appeared in the doorway, confusion written across his face. Mother? What's she talking about? Evelyn's carefully maintained facade cracked. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Addison, please. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you. And Evelyn? I want my mother's locket back. Today. You have no idea what you're doing, she whispered. Actually, I do. For the first time since Dad died, I know exactly what I'm doing. I turned to the workers. Pack everything back inside. Now. As the workers began returning furniture to the house, I watched Ryan and Evelyn retreat to their car. But before they drove away, I caught a glimpse of Evelyn's face in the rearview mirror. She wasn't scared anymore. She was angry. I pulled out my phone and called Jess. I need your help again. We're going to need to watch our backs. Because I knew now, this wasn't just about a house or a divorce. This was about murder. And Evelyn Palmer had just become very, very dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt different now, knowing what I knew. Every creak, every shadow seemed to whisper secrets about my mother's death. Around 3 in the morning, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Park. 7 a.m. Come alone. I knew I shouldn't go. Jess would tell me I was crazy. Sam would probably say the same. But there I was at 6:55 a.m., watching Ryan pace near the old bandstand where we'd had our first date. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept either. When he saw me, he stopped pacing but didn't come closer. The locket, he said without preamble. Mother won't give it up. She's not well, Addie. Not well? I kept my distance. We're not willing to face what she did. You don't understand. He ran his hands through his unkempt hair. After you left yesterday, I found something in her study. Records. Bank statements. Everything's gone, the Palmer fortune, the investments, all of it. She's been lying to me for years. A jogger passed by, and we both fell silent until she was out of earshot. Your father, Ryan continued, his voice breaking slightly, he was supporting us. All this time, Mother said she was managing the family estate, but But really, she was blackmailing my father, I finished. Using whatever's in that locket to keep him paying. Ryan's face went pale. Blackmail? No, that's not. Then what? I stepped closer, anger finally overtaking caution. Why did my mother die in a car accident the same week she confronted Evelyn about her relationship with my father? Why did Dad spend 30 years paying your family's bills? Why won't your mother take off that damn locket? Before Ryan could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Jess, "Get home now. Someone broke in. Police are here." My heart stopped. What did you do? What? Ryan looked genuinely confused. I've been here since dawn, waiting. Another text from Jess, "Your father's study is ransacked. The maple desk is destroyed." I turned to run, but Ryan caught my arm. Addie, wait. There's something else you need to know. About the night your mother died. Let go of me. I yanked my arm free. If your mother touched anything in that study. I was there. The words exploded from him like they'd been trapped for years. The night of the accident. I was 12. I saw everything. Time seemed to freeze. In the distance, I could hear sirens. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket. But all I could focus on was Ryan's face, the face of the man I'd loved. Who'd apparently spent our entire marriage hiding the truth about my mother's death. Tell me, I whispered. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. Ryan. What do you think you're doing? We both turned to see Evelyn striding toward us, the locket bouncing against her chest with each determined step. But something was different. The chain was broken, hanging awkwardly, like someone had tried to snatch it. Mother, Ryan started, don't. Get in the car, she snapped at him. Then to me, her voice deadly calm, your little break-in attempt failed. Next time, don't send amateurs to do your dirty work. What are you talking about? She smiled, cold and triumphant. The police are at your house right now, dear. Something about a burglary gone wrong? Such a shame. Almost as tragic as what happened to your mother. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sam, don't go home. Meet me at my office. I found something in your father's safety deposit box. Something about the night of the accident. I looked at Ryan, saw the conflict in his eyes, then at Evelyn, whose hand was now clasped protectively over the damaged locket. Whatever truth lay between them, I wasn't going to get it here. This isn't over, I told them both, then turned and ran toward my car. Behind me, I heard Ryan call my name, but I didn't look back. Because now I knew, the answer wasn't in the house or the study. It was in whatever Sam had found in that safety deposit box. And this time, Evelyn Palmer couldn't stop me from finding the truth. Sam's office was dark when I arrived, the door slightly ajar. Something felt wrong immediately, but I was too desperate for answers to turn back. Sam? I called out, pushing the door open. Papers were scattered across his desk, drawers pulled out, cabinets standing open. In the center of the chaos sat a small metal box, my father's safety deposit box, its lid thrown back like a broken promise. Empty. He's not here. Ryan's voice behind me made me jump. He stood in the doorway, looking haunted. Mother got here first. How did you? I followed you. He stepped inside, closing the door. There's something you need to know about Sam Green. He's not just a notary. He was there the night your mother died too. My legs felt weak. I grabbed the edge of Sam's desk. What? He was having an affair with my mother. Ryan's voice cracked. Your mother found out. She threatened to tell your father everything, about the affair, about the embezzlement, about... What embezzlement? A new voice joined us, about how I helped Evelyn steal from your father's company for years. Sam stepped out from the shadows of his private office, holding a gun. But it wasn't pointed at me, it was aimed at Ryan. I'm sorry, Addie, Sam said, his professional demeanor completely gone. I really did try to help you. But Evelyn. She has ways of making people do terrible things. Like killing my mother? The words felt like glass in my throat. That was an accident, Ryan interrupted. Mother just wanted to scare her, to keep her quiet. But the brakes. The brakes were cut, Sam finished. By me. On Evelyn's orders. The room started spinning. I gripped the desk harder. And my father? Did he know? He figured it out eventually. Sam's hand trembled slightly. That's why he changed his will. Why he left everything to you. He knew Evelyn would try to destroy the evidence once he was gone. The locket, I whispered. What's really in it? Pictures, Ryan said quietly. Of Mother and Sam, from back then. And a USB drive. With all the financial records. Everything that could prove what they did. Sam's laugh was bitter. Your father was clever. He knew Evelyn would never part with that locket voluntarily. It was the perfect safe. So now what? I looked between them. You kill us both? Add 2 more accidents to the list? No. Sam adjusted his grip on the gun. Just Ryan. Make it look like he attacked me, tried to destroy evidence. A tragic end to the Palmer legacy. You really think my mother will let you live if you kill me? Ryan's voice was steady, but I saw fear in his eyes. Your mother's being arrested as we speak, Sam replied. Anonymous tip about financial fraud. The police are probably at her house right now. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Jess sending another warning, probably. But I couldn't look away from the scene unfolding before me. She'll still have the locket, I said. All the evidence. No. Ryan reached slowly into his jacket. She doesn't. The silver chain dangled from his fingers, the locket swinging gently. I took it while she was distracted at the park. Everything you need to prove what they did to your mother is right here, Addie. Sam's gun shifted slightly. Hand it over. Or what? I stepped between them. You'll kill us both? Add my name to the list of people you've murdered to protect yourself? Addie, don't, Ryan started. But I kept my eyes on Sam, watching his facade crack. My father trusted you. He made you promise to protect me, didn't he? That's why you showed me the will. Why you tried to help. But in the end, you're just another coward hiding behind Evelyn Palmer's lies. The gun wavered. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to him. Then I heard police sirens in the distance, and everything happened at once. Sam lunged for the locket. Ryan shoved me aside. The gun went off. And as I fell, I caught one final glimpse of my mother's locket, falling open at last, its secrets spilling across the floor like blood. The hospital waiting room felt like limbo. Ryan was in surgery, the bullet had missed his vital organs, but just barely. Sam was in custody. And Evelyn. Evelyn was walking through the entrance doors like she owned them, still wearing her designer outfit despite the handcuffs. 2 detectives flanked her, but her eyes found me immediately. Well. I suppose you're happy now. Sit down, Mrs. Palmer, one detective ordered, but she was already sliding into the chair across from me. Your son is in surgery because of you, I said quietly. My son is in surgery because he betrayed me. Her voice cracked slightly. For you. Just like your father betrayed me for your mother. I pulled out my phone, where I'd downloaded the contents of the USB drive from the locket. Want to see what I found? All those transfers from Dad's company. The fake accounts. The evidence that you and Sam used to blackmail my father for years. You have no idea what really happened. She leaned forward, despite the handcuffs. Your precious father wasn't innocent. He chose your mother over me, used my love to build his empire, then discarded me like I meant nothing. So you killed my mother? I loved your father, she whispered fiercely. Everything I did was for love. No. Ryan's voice made us both turn. He stood in the doorway, pale and bandaged, but alive. Everything you did was for control. Ryan, Evelyn started to rise, but the detectives pushed her back down. Darling, you don't understand. I understand everything. He moved slowly to sit beside me. I remember that night. I remember you making Sam cut the brakes. I remember you telling me it was our secret, that if I ever told anyone, we'd lose everything. Tears streaked Evelyn's perfect makeup. I protected you. Everything I did was to protect our family. By killing my mother? I pulled out one final piece of evidence, a letter I'd found among the locket's contents. Or by threatening to kill Dad if he ever told anyone the truth? Your father was weak, she spat. He could have had everything with me, but he chose her. Then he had the audacity to feel guilty, to pay us off like we were charity cases. He paid you off, because you threatened to tell everyone that Ryan was his son. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ryan went completely still beside me. What? He whispered. I handed him the letter, a DNA test from 30 years ago. That's why she couldn't let go. Why Dad felt responsible. You're my half-brother, Ryan. And she used that truth to destroy both our families. Evelyn's facade finally shattered completely. He never loved you like he loved me. Never. I made sure of that. Every payment, every secret, every lie, it was all to prove that he couldn't escape me. Couldn't escape us. Detective, I said quietly, I think we're done here. As they led Evelyn away, her composure crumbled entirely. She thrashed against the handcuffs, screaming about love and betrayal and revenge. But I wasn't watching her anymore. I was watching Ryan, who looked lost in a way I'd never seen before. I'm sorry, I said softly. I didn't know how to tell you. All this time, he murmured, I thought I was protecting her. But I was just helping her hurt more people. Helping her hurt you. I took his hand, not as a wife anymore, but as something else. Something complicated and broken and real. We can't change what they did. But we can choose what we do now. He squeezed my hand back, and in that moment, I finally understood what my father had tried to tell me in his letter. The debt of the heart wasn't about money or revenge. It was about the price we pay for the truth, and the cost of keeping secrets. What do we do now? Ryan asked. I thought about the house, about the inheritance, about all the tangled threads of our shared history. We start over. Not as the Palmers or the Collinses. Just as ourselves. Through the hospital windows, I could see the sun rising. A new day, full of complicated truths and uncertain futures. But for the first time since my father died, I felt ready to face it. 6 months later, I stood in front of my father's maple desk, now restored and sitting in my new home office. The morning light caught the brass handles, making them shine like new secrets waiting to be discovered. Need help with that? Ryan asked from the doorway. He looked different now, lighter somehow, despite everything we'd been through. The divorce papers had been finalized last week, but our story wasn't ending. It was just changing shape. Just sorting through the last box, I said, pulling out a familiar envelope. Dad's final letter. Ryan stepped into the room but kept his distance. We were still learning the boundaries of our new relationship as siblings. You haven't read it yet? Was waiting for the right time. I broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Want to hear it? He nodded, settling into one of the chairs by the window. The same window where, half a year ago, I'd watched him drive away thinking our story was over. My dearest Addie, I read aloud, if you're reading this, then you found the truth. All of it. The good and the bad, the love and the betrayal. I spent 30 years trying to protect you from a past that was always going to catch up with us. But in doing so, I failed to protect you from the one thing that matters most, the weight of secrets. I paused, glancing at Ryan. His eyes were fixed on the desk, where a framed photo now sat, him and me as children, at different birthday parties. Unknowingly connected by more than just marriage. The debt I spoke of wasn't just about money or guilt. It was about the choices we make when love becomes twisted by fear. Evelyn loved me once, purely and completely. I loved her too. But love without truth is like a house built on sand. Eventually, everything crumbles. The doorbell rang, and Jess let herself in, carrying coffee and breakfast. She'd been my rock through everything, the trials, the media circus, the long nights of putting together the pieces of our fractured families. "Keep reading," she said, handing out the coffees. "I'm leaving you the house, the company, everything. Not because you deserve to inherit my mistakes, but because I trust you to build something better from the ruins." "And Ryan?" I looked up at him. "Dad knew?" "Keep going," Ryan said softly. "And Ryan, my son who never knew he was mine, forgive me. I chose silence to protect you from Evelyn's anger, but in doing so, I denied you the truth about who you are. Addie will help you understand. She's stronger than I ever was." The letter ended with a final revelation: coordinates to a safety deposit box in another bank, one none of us knew about. Inside, we'd found one last gift: college funds for both of us, set up the day Ryan was born. Our father had never stopped planning for a future where the truth would finally come out. "So," Jess said, breaking the thoughtful silence, "what happens now?" I looked around the office, at the desk that had started everything, at the brother I never knew I had. At the life I was rebuilding from the ashes of so many secrets. "Now we stop letting the past define us," I said. "The company's being restructured. Half the shares are yours," I told Ryan. "Dad wanted us to build something together, even if he couldn't be here to see it." "And Evelyn?" Jess asked carefully. "She wrote to me from prison," Ryan said. "I haven't opened it yet." I touched the drawer where I kept my own unopened letter from Evelyn. Some truths needed time. Some wounds needed more than just answers to heal. "Whatever's in those letters," I said, "we'll face it together. No more secrets." As morning light filled the room, I realized that's what Dad had tried to teach us all along. The debt of the heart wasn't about revenge or justice, it was about the price we pay for truth, and the courage it takes to face it head-on. Ryan picked up the photo from the desk. "Think he'd be proud of us?" "Yeah," I said, watching the sunrise paint everything in new colors. "I think he would."
I'm Hannah, and I met John in college, and we clicked instantly. He was charming, funny, and ambitious. We got married right after graduation and started building our life together. When our daughter Sophie was born, I was over the moon. I poured all my love and energy into raising her, determined to give her the best start in life. I believed in setting boundaries and instilling discipline. Knowledge is power, I'd always tell her. Study hard and you'll go far. John, on the other hand, had a different parenting style. He'd shower Sophie with gifts, buy her sweets, and let her get away with things I wouldn't. "Come on, Hannah," he'd say. "Let her be a kid." It bothered me, but I figured we balanced each other out. As Sophie grew older, it became clear she was a daddy's girl. She'd run to John with her problems, laugh at his jokes, and light up when he came home from work. With me, it was all eye rolls and yes, mom in that tone, teenager's perfect. I'd bite my tongue, reminding myself that Sophie would understand when she was older. She'd see that my strict approach came from a place of love. But even at 17, Sophie remained firmly in her father's camp. It stung, but I consoled myself with the thought that I was doing right by her in the long run. Despite these small frustrations, I considered myself fulfilled. I had a successful career at a respected clinic, a husband who still made me laugh, and a daughter who, despite our differences, I adored. Life was good, or so I thought. Everything changed on a crisp autumn day. I was doing laundry, a mundane task I'd done 1,000 times before. As I emptied John's coat pockets, my fingers brushed against a piece of paper. I pulled it out, expecting a grocery receipt or a dry cleaning ticket. Instead, I found myself staring at a receipt from an upscale perfume store. The perfume listed was an expensive brand I'd never wear, too floral, too sweet. John knew I preferred subtler scents. I stood there, the washing machine humming in the background, as 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. Was it a surprise gift? But my birthday had passed, and our anniversary was months away. Was it for his mother? But she was allergic to most perfumes. With shaking hands, I took a picture of the receipt with my phone. Then, carefully, I placed it back in his pocket. I needed time to think, to process this information without jumping to conclusions. That evening, when John was in the shower, I checked his coat again. The receipt was gone. I kept my discovery to myself, not breathing a word to John or Sophie, but now that my eyes were open, I couldn't stop noticing things. It was like a fog had lifted, revealing a landscape I didn't recognize. John's late nights at work weren't new, but now they felt different. "Big project, honey," he'd say, kissing me on the cheek as he left. "Don't wait up," I'd nod and smile, all the while wondering who he was really meeting. His new haircut caught my attention too. He'd always been particular about his appearance, but this was different. Younger. Trendier. When I complimented him, he shrugged it off. Thought I'd try something new. The weekend fishing trips were the worst. Every other Saturday he'd load up his gear and head out to meet his buddies. "Fish are really biting lately," he'd say with a grin. I'd watch him drive away, wondering if he even owned a fishing rod anymore. Before finding that receipt, I hadn't connected these dots. Now they formed a picture I couldn't unsee. The thought I'd been avoiding burst to the surface. John had a mistress. I tried to shake it off. This was John, my John. The man who held my hand through 20 hours of labor. The guy who surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays. He wouldn't cheat. But the doubt gnawed at me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, listening to John's steady breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of her. One sleepless night, I found myself scrolling through Facebook. A name caught my eye: Mike Thompson. We'd gone to high school together, and I vaguely remembered he'd become a private investigator. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent him a message. We met at a coffee shop across town the next day. I took a deep breath and spilled everything. The receipt, John's behavior, my suspicions. Mike listened without interrupting, his face neutral. Mike agreed to take the case. As I watched him leave, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Soon I'd have answers, but did I really want them? The next 3 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went through the motions, smiling at my patients, helping Sophie with her schoolwork, making small talk with John over dinner. But inside, I was a mess. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd jump, thinking it was Mike with news. Every time John came home late, I'd search his face for signs of guilt. Every time Sophie mentioned her dad, I'd wonder if she knew something I didn't. "You okay, Mom?" Sophie asked one evening, catching me staring blankly at the wall. "You seem off." I plastered on a smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Lots of clients this week." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. I felt a pang of guilt for lying to her, but what could I say? "Your dad might be cheating on me, and I've hired someone to spy on him." John, caught up in whatever or whoever was occupying his time, didn't seem to notice anything amiss. Part of me was relieved, part of me was furious that he could be so oblivious to my pain. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was between clients when my phone buzzed. Mike's name flashed on the screen, and my heart leapt into my throat. "Hannah? Can we meet?" His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop in an hour. The rest of my appointments were a blur. I went through the motions, smiling and nodding at my clients while my mind raced. Mike was already there when I arrived, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. "Hannah." Mike pushed the envelope towards me. "It's all in here. Photos, dates, locations. I'm sorry, Hannah, but your suspicions were right." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. John, my John, with his arms around a younger woman. They were laughing, looking into each other's eyes with unmistakable affection. "Who is she?" I managed to choke out. "Alicia Benson," Mike replied. "She's 28, works at John's company. She's the director's daughter." I flipped through more photos. John and Alicia at restaurants, walking in the park, boarding a yacht. Each image was a fresh wound. They'd been seeing each other for over a year, Mike continued. From what I've gathered, it's serious. They've talked about a future together. I nodded numbly, barely registering his words. Then a photo made me gasp. It showed John and Alicia at a cafe, but they weren't alone. Sitting with them, smiling and laughing, was Sophie. No, I whispered. It can't be. Mike's voice was gentle. I'm sorry, Hannah, but Sophie knows about the affair. She's met with them several times. Those weekends she said she was with friends? She was with them on Alicia's yacht. There's more. John and Alicia have been buying Sophie expensive gifts. Designer clothes. Jewelry. I think they're trying to buy her silence. I don't remember the drive home. Thankfully, the house was empty when I arrived. I moved on autopilot, packing a small suitcase with clothes and essentials. I couldn't stay here, couldn't face John or Sophie. I checked into a hotel across town, my mind still reeling. Once in my room, I called my boss at the clinic and took 2 weeks off, unpaid. Family emergency. I turned off my phone and sank onto the bed. The envelope seemed to mock me from the bedside table. Unable to help myself, I opened it again. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damning photos. Sophie's smile as she hugged Alicia. John's arm around them both. My anger, which had started as a slow simmer, began to boil over. For years I'd been the understanding one, the peacemaker, the one who bent over backwards to keep everyone happy. Well, I was done with that. My eyes fell on my laptop. Without really thinking, I opened it and logged into my bank account. There it was, Sophie's college fund. I'd been squirreling away money for years, determined to give her the best education possible. It was my way of showing love, even when she pushed me away. Now, looking at that balance, all I could think about was how Sophie had betrayed me. How she'd lied to my face, spent time with that woman, accepted her gifts. My daughter, who I'd sacrificed so much for, had stabbed me in the back. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Years ago, before Sophie was born, I dreamed of opening my own cosmetology office. But then life happened: marriage, a baby, mortgage payments. My dream got pushed aside. I stared at the account balance. It was enough. Enough to start over, to finally pursue my own dreams instead of everyone else's. You know what I said out loud to the empty hotel room? Screw it. This money isn't for Sophie anymore. It's for me. The words hung in the air, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had a future, even if it wasn't the one I'd planned. Emotionally drained, I finally drifted off to sleep, my phone still turned off. The next morning I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a blissful moment I forgot everything, then reality came crashing back. With a deep breath I turned on my phone. It immediately exploded with notifications. Missed calls from John and Sophie, voicemails, text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Their concern, which once would have melted my heart, now felt like acid in my veins. How dare they pretend to care now? I didn't bother listening to the voicemails or reading the texts. Instead, I got dressed, packed my bag and checked out of the hotel. It was time to face the music. The drive home felt surreal. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. But I squashed that impulse. I needed closure. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw John's car and Sophie's bike. They were both home. Good. I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. John and Sophie rushed out of the living room, their faces a mix of relief and anxiety. Hannah, where have you been? We've been so worried, John exclaimed, moving to hug me. Sophie chimed in, her voice shrill with concern. Mom, are you okay? Why didn't you answer our calls? I stepped back, avoiding John's embrace. A cold laugh escaped me, stopping them both in their tracks. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I tossed it on the coffee table, photos spilling out. John and Sophie stared at the images, their faces draining of color. There they were, in glossy 8x10s, John with Alicia, Sophie with them both. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. John was the first to recover, his shock morphing into defensive anger. "Hannah, it's not what you think," he started, his voice placating. "Alicia and I were just friends, and Sophie, she—" "Don't you dare drag Sophie into your lies," I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Sophie jumped in, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Mom, please, I can explain. I only met her a few times, I didn't know." I held up a hand, silencing them both. "Save it, I know everything. The yacht trips, the expensive gifts, the dinners. Every lie, every betrayal." They exchanged a look, and I saw the moment they realized their act wasn't working. The mask slipped away, revealing the strangers beneath. John's face hardened, all pretense of remorse vanishing. "Fine," he said coldly. "You want the truth? Yes, I'm with Alicia. She's young, beautiful, and rich. She makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years." His words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I turned to Sophie, waiting for her contribution to this character assassination. She didn't disappoint. "Alicia is amazing, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's successful, stylish, fun, not strict and boring like you." I absorbed their words, each one a fresh wound. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "I see," I said, my voice steady. "Well, let me tell you both something. John, I want a divorce. I'll have my lawyer contact you." John's eyes widened, but before he could speak, I turned to Sophie. "And you, young lady, you can forget about me paying for your college tuition. If Alicia is so amazing, maybe she can foot the bill." Sophie's jaw dropped. "What? You can't do that. That's my money. I've been counting on it. I want to get into my dream school." "Should have thought about that before you stabbed me in the back," I replied, unmoved by her crocodile tears. "Mom, please," she sobbed, her cool demeanor crumbling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please forgive me. I need that money." But her earlier words echoed in my mind. Strict, boring. Worse than the other woman. Ignoring their protests, I went upstairs and packed the rest of my belongings. As I came back down, suitcase in hand, John blocked my path. "Hannah, let's talk about this rationally," he said, his tone businesslike. "The house, our assets." "My lawyer will be in touch," I interrupted, pushing past him. "I'm done talking to you." The next few weeks passed in a blur. I found a small apartment and threw myself into the logistics of dismantling a 20-year marriage. I hired a lawyer and requested a mediator, determined to handle this divorce as cleanly as possible. The last thing I wanted was a drawn-out, messy court battle. Sophie called incessantly at first. When I didn't pick up, she resorted to texts, then emails. Each message was a mix of apology and demand. I read each one, my heart breaking anew every time. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself staring at my phone, Sophie's number on the screen. My finger would hover over the call button, a war raging inside me. Part of me yearned to hear her voice, to believe her apologies. But then I'd remember her cruel words, her secret meetings with John and Alicia, and I'd put the phone down. Days turned into weeks. Each meeting with John was a test of endurance, conducted in the sterile environment of our lawyers' offices. The man I once loved was now just another face across the conference table, all business and cold efficiency. One day, as I settled into my usual chair, the door opened and Sophie walked in behind John. My heart clenched at the sight of her, but her expression stopped any warm feelings cold. She looked at me with a mixture of condescension and triumph that took my breath away. "Hello, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you don't mind me joining today." Before I could respond, she continued, "I just wanted to let you know that I won't be needing your pathetic money after all. Alicia has generously offered to pay for my education at any top college in the States." She paused, clearly savoring the moment. "Oh, and I'll be living with Dad and Alicia from now on. We're going to be one big, happy family." I felt the eyes of our lawyers and the mediator on me, waiting for my reaction. But I was too tired, too drained to feel much of anything anymore. I simply shrugged. "If that's what you want, Sophie, I said, my voice flat. I hope you'll be happy. Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment. Had she been hoping for a bigger reaction? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same smug look. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal jargon and asset division. In the end, John and I split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, with the proceeds divided equally between us. With my share from the house sale and the money I'd saved for Sophie's college fund, I had enough to make a fresh start. I found a small but cozy apartment and, after much soul-searching, decided to take a leap of faith. I quit my job at the clinic and threw myself into creating a business plan for my own cosmetology office. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. All those years of experience, all the dreams I'd put on hold, it was time to put them to use. Weeks of planning, renovating, and nervous anticipation followed. But finally, Hannah's Beauty Haven opened its doors. Those first few months were a whirlwind of long hours, social media marketing blitzes, and the slow but steady growth of my client base. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the day's work was done, I'd find myself scrolling through social media. Sophie's posts would appear on my feed, pictures of her in designer clothes, lounging on Alicia's yacht, always smiling, always looking carefree and happy. Each image was a knife to my heart. I'd wonder if she ever thought of me, if she missed me at all. When her 18th birthday rolled around, I sent her a message wishing her well. Same for her high school graduation. Both went unanswered. A year had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. My cosmetology office, once just a dream, was now a thriving reality. The steady stream of loyal clients from my clinic days, combined with a growing number of new faces, kept me busier than I'd ever been. I'd even hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, as I was finishing up with a client, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Sarah. "Hannah, you won't believe what I just saw," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "I was at the Meadowbrook supermarket, you know, the one on the other side of town, and I swear I saw Sophie working at the checkout." My heart skipped a beat. "Sophie? Are you sure?" "Positive." She looked different, thinner, tired, but it was definitely her. I thanked Sarah and hung up, my mind reeling. Sophie, working at a supermarket. What about college? What about Alicia's promise to fund her education? That night, after closing the office, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked up Sophie's social media. What I found shocked me. All her glamorous photos with John and Alicia were gone. There were no updates, no college move-in pictures, nothing. Her once active profile was a digital ghost town. For days I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to rush to the supermarket to demand answers. But another part, the part still nursing the wounds of betrayal, held me back. Finally, on my day off, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the Meadowbrook supermarket, my heart pounding as I walked through the automatic doors. And there she was, Sophie, my baby girl, looking so different from the confident young woman who'd sneered at me in the lawyer's office. She was thin, almost gaunt, dark circles under her eyes as she mechanically scanned items at the checkout. Our eyes met, and I saw a flash of something. Embarrassment? Shame? Before I could decipher it, she looked away, her cheeks flushing. I approached her checkout, my steps hesitant. "Sophie." She glanced up, then quickly back down at the register. "What do you want?" Her voice was harsh, defensive. "I'd like to talk. Maybe we could get coffee after your shift." "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped, still not meeting my eyes. "Please leave." "Sophie, please." I said leave. She finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else. Was it fear? Stunned by her vehemence, I backed away. Other customers were starting to stare. With a heavy heart, I left the supermarket, climbing into my car with shaking hands. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had happened? Where were John and Alicia? Why wasn't Sophie in college? For days after, I waited for a call, a text, anything. But my phone remained stubbornly silent. I thought about going back to the supermarket, but Sophie's words rang in my ears. "I don't want to talk to you." Just as I was beginning to lose hope, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, I answered. Mom, Sophie's voice, small and uncertain, came through the speaker. Can we meet, please? We agreed to meet at a small cafe near my office. As I waited, my mind raced with possibilities. When Sophie walked in, my breath caught. She looked so different from the glowing, confident girl in those yacht photos, so much older than her years. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. And then, like a dam breaking, the story poured out of her. At first, living with John and Alicia had been a dream. Designer clothes, yacht trips, promises of a bright future. But the honeymoon period didn't last. Alicia started making comments, Sophie said, her eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. Little digs about how much space I took up, how expensive I was. Then she told Dad I couldn't live with them anymore, that there was no money for college. I gasped. But your father? Surely he didn't agree. Sophie's bitter laugh was answer enough. He said I was an adult now, that I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. They kicked me out, Mom. I had nowhere to go. Why didn't you call me? I asked, reaching for her hand across the table. She pulled away, tears in her eyes. I was so ashamed. And then I realized, this must be how you felt when we betrayed you. I couldn't face you after that. My heart broke for her, even as a small, petty part of me whispered, good. Now she knows how it feels. I'm sharing a crappy apartment with a coworker, Sophie continued. The supermarket job barely covers rent and food. I feel so useless. I wanted to wrap her in my arms, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Sophie, I said gently, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you're right, you did betray me. Actions have consequences, and this is something you need to work through. We both cried then, mourning the lost year, the broken trust, the pain we'd caused each other. As we parted, something had shifted between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. That night I tossed and turned, Sophie's story playing on repeat in my mind. By morning I'd made a decision. I called Sophie. I have a proposition for you, I said. I need an administrator at my office. The pay's not great, but it's better than the supermarket. And maybe we can start rebuilding from there. There was a long pause. Then, yes, I'd like that. Thank you, Mom. It's been 6 months since that day. Sophie works at my office now, learning the business from the ground up. She's saving for community college, determined to make it on her own merit this time. Our relationship is a work in progress. There are good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension. The trust we once had is slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt, one day at a time. As I watch Sophie greet a client with a warm smile, I feel a glimmer of hope. We're not the same people we were before the betrayal, the divorce, the year of silence. But maybe, just maybe, we can be something new, something stronger. I'm Sarah, and it all started when I met Tom in college. We were in different courses, but we hit it off right away. He was charming, funny, and damn good looking. We dated throughout college, and by the time graduation rolled around, we were head over heels in love. We got hitched right after graduation, and I was on cloud 9. My parents, Ellen and George, were loaded. They'd always given me everything I wanted, and my wedding was no exception. It was a fairy tale affair, white dress, fancy venue, the works. The first year of marriage was bliss. We were young, in love, and had the world at our feet. Tom had landed a great job at a marketing firm, and I was working as a teacher at a local elementary school. Life was good. Then, about a year after we got married, I found out I was pregnant. I was over the moon. His reaction wasn't quite what I expected. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I brushed off his lukewarm response, chalking it up to shock. I was sure he'd come around once the news sank in. 9 months later, our daughter Lily was born. She was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a set of lungs that could wake the dead. I was smitten. Tom, on the other hand, seemed overwhelmed. He'd hold Lily awkwardly, like she was a ticking time bomb. When she cried, which was often, he'd practically run from the room. "I thought we'd have more time, he said one night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep. To enjoy being married, travel, all that stuff." I tried to reassure him. "We can still do all that, Tom. It'll just be a little different with Lily." As the months went by, Tom started staying late at work more and more often. He'd come home after Lily was asleep, citing big projects and demanding clients. I wanted to believe him, but a nagging doubt started to grow in the pit of my stomach. Friday nights became guys' night for Tom. He'd go out with his work buddies, coming home in the wee hours of the morning, reeking of booze. "Keep that kid quiet, will you?" he'd snap when Lily's cries woke him up. "Some of us need to sleep." 3 years flew by in a blur of diapers, tantrums, and stolen moments of joy. Lily was now 3, a bundle of energy with her dad's green eyes and my stubborn chin. I'd gone back to work, and Lily had started kindergarten. We'd fallen into a routine, but it felt like Tom and I were just going through the motions. Then came the day that shattered what was left of our marriage. "I've got a business trip next week," Tom announced over dinner one night. "I'll be gone for 3 days." I nodded, used to his frequent trips by now. The day after Tom left, I got a frantic call from his mother, Martha. "Sarah, I'm at the hospital," she said, her voice shaky. "I had some chest pains. Could you let Tom know?" My heart raced. "Of course, Martha. I'll call him right away." But Tom wasn't answering his phone. After trying for hours, I started to worry. What if something had happened to him too? In desperation, I called his boss, Mike. Business trip Mike sounded confused. I didn't send Tom on any trip. My world tilted on its axis. If Tom wasn't on a business trip, where the hell was he? When he waltzed through the door 3 days later, whistling like he didn't have a care in the world, I was ready. "How was your trip?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Your mom's in the hospital, and your boss says he never sent you anywhere." The color drained from Tom's face. "Sarah, I can explain." "Save it," I spat. "Just tell me the truth for once. Are you cheating on me?" The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. "Her name's Amanda," Tom finally mumbled. "It's been going on for a while now." The divorce was ugly. Tom fought me on everything: the house, the car, even Lily's teddy bear, but the worst was when he refused to pay child support. "I'm not paying for a kid I never wanted," he snarled during one of our meetings. Something in me snapped. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "Keep your money. But I want you to sign away your parental rights. You clearly don't want to be a father, so make it official." To my shock, Tom didn't even hesitate. He signed the papers with a flourish, and just like that, he was out of our lives. The next 2 years were tough. Tom's parents, bless them, helped out with Lily and gave us money when they could. But being a single mom was harder than I'd ever imagined. Then, when Lily was 5, I met Jack. He was a widower with a daughter, Emma, who was a year younger than Lily. We bonded over playground meetups and PTA meetings, and before I knew it, I was falling in love again. We got married in a small ceremony, with Lily and Emma as our flower girls. Watching Jack with the girls, I felt hope blooming in my chest for the first time in years. As time passed, our little family grew closer. Lily started calling Jack Dad and Emma called me Mom. It felt right, like we were always meant to be together. 3 years after we got married, our son Max was born. Jack doted on all 3 kids equally, never distinguishing between his and mine. We were happy, really and truly happy. 20 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that Lily was a toddler, tottering around our living room. Now, at 25, she's a college graduate, engaged and planning her own wedding. Where did the time go? Lily's fiancé is a great guy. Jack and I both like him. He's kind, hardworking, and he clearly adores our daughter. When they announced their engagement, Jack opened a special account for Lily's wedding expenses and gave her full access. When we told Lily, she burst into tears and hugged us both. For weeks after that, our house was a flurry of wedding magazines, color swatches, and excited phone calls. Lily would burst through the door, bubbling over with news about venues, dresses, and floral arrangements. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe what we found," she'd exclaim, spreading photos across our kitchen table. "Isn't this centerpiece gorgeous?" Jack and I would nod and smile, caught up in her enthusiasm. It warmed my heart to see her so happy, to be part of this exciting time in her life. But then, things started to change. The visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter. At first, I chalked it up to wedding stress. Planning a wedding is no small feat, after all, but as the weeks went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Lily showed up unannounced. The moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. Her usual bright smile was gone, replaced by a tense, almost nervous expression. "Mom, I need to talk to you and..." "Jack," she said, stumbling over the name. My heart dropped. Jack, not Dad. In all the years since Jack had come into our lives, I'd never heard Lily call him anything but Dad. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let me get Jack." I found my husband in the garage tinkering with his latest project. One look at my face and he was on his feet, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etching his features. "It's Lily," I replied. "She wants to talk to us." "And Jack." "She called you Jack." I saw the hurt flash across his face before he schooled his expression into calm neutrality. He nodded, took my hand, and together we walked back into the house. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Jack and I sat down across from her, our hands still linked under the table. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. "All right, Lily," Jack said, his voice gentle despite the worry I could see in his eyes. "We're here. What did you want to talk about?" Lily took a deep breath, her eyes darting between Jack and me. "I met my biological father a couple of months ago. I was at Grandma Martha's and he showed up. We talked for hours. He's changed, Mom. He wants to make things right." I felt Jack stiffen beside me. "And what does this have to do with the wedding?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Lily's chin lifted, a stubborn set to her jaw that I recognized all too well. "He asked to walk me down the aisle, and I want him to." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the sound of Jack's heart breaking. "Lily," I said gently, "sweetheart, I know this is confusing. But Jack has been your dad since you were 5. Tom, he abandoned you. He signed away his rights." "He made a mistake," Lily's voice rose. "He's sorry now. He wants to fix things." Jack leaned forward, his face a mask of hurt and confusion. "Lily, I've raised you as my own for 20 years. I've been there for every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak. I thought I was your dad." "You are," Lily insisted, then faltered. "I mean, you're my stepdad and I love you. But Tom is my real father. It's my wedding, and I want him to walk me down the aisle." I saw the moment Jack's heart shattered. His face crumpled for a split second before he regained control. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've always considered you my daughter. Not my stepdaughter. My daughter." "Well, I'm not," Lily shouted, jumping to her feet. "You're my stepfather, not my real dad. This is my wedding, and I'll decide who walks me down the aisle." The front door slammed and Emma, Jack's biological daughter, rushed into the kitchen. "What's going on? Why is everyone yelling?" Close behind her was Max, our son, looking bewildered. "Mom? Dad? Lily?" I quickly filled them in, watching their faces change from confusion to anger. "How could you do this to Dad?" Emma demanded, glaring at Lily. "After everything he's done for you." Max nodded, his young face twisted with hurt. "Yeah, Lily. Dad's always treated us all the same. How can you say he's not your real dad?" Lily looked around wildly, her eyes filling with tears. "You don't understand. None of you understand." With that, she bolted from the house, the door slamming behind her. We all stood there in stunned silence. Jack's face was ashen, his eyes fixed on the spot where Lily had been standing. Emma moved to his side, wrapping an arm around him. Max joined them, and I watched as my family closed ranks around Jack. I moved to Jack's other side, taking his hand. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Where did I go wrong?" My heart broke for him. "For all of us. You didn't go wrong, Jack," I said firmly. "You've been the best father any of these kids could ask for. Lily's, I don't know what's gotten into her." As we stood there, our little family huddled together in the kitchen, I couldn't help but wonder how had things gone so wrong, and more importantly, how were we going to fix this? The days following Lily's bombshell announcement were tense. Jack and I kept expecting her to call, to apologize, to come to her senses. But the call never came. Instead, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends and family members sending me links, asking if I'd seen Lily's latest posts. With a heavy heart, I opened her social media page. There they were. Photos of Lily with Tom, both grinning at the camera. "So happy to reconnect with my real dad," the caption read. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. When I showed Jack, his face hardened. "That's it," he said, his voice low and controlled. "If she doesn't consider me her father anymore, I'm not paying for her wedding. I'm blocking her access to the wedding account. She's made her choice." I didn't argue. How could I when he looked so broken? A few days later, the other shoe dropped. Lily burst into our house like a hurricane, her face red with fury. "What the hell?" she screamed, not even bothering with a greeting. "Why can't I access the wedding account? How am I supposed to pay the vendors? The venue? The caterers?" "I'm sure your real father can help you out," Jack replied, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Since you've chosen him, it seems only right that he should foot the bill." Lily gaped at him, then turned to me. "Mom, you can't let him do this. Make him give me access to the account again." I shook my head slowly. "Lily, this is Jack's decision. And frankly, I agree with him." "What?" she shrieked. "How can you take his side? I'm your daughter." "And Jack is my husband," I replied firmly. "He's been more of a father to you than Tom ever was. You can't expect to hurt him like this and still have him pay for your wedding." Lily's face contorted with rage. "Fine," she spat. "If that's how it's going to be, then you need to make a choice, Mom. It's me or him. Your daughter or your husband. Choose." She stood there, chest heaving, clearly expecting me to cave. To choose her, my flesh and blood, over Jack. But in that moment, looking at her tantrum-throwing face, I didn't recognize my daughter at all. "I'm not choosing anyone, Lily," I said quietly. "I love you and I love Jack. But I agree with his decision. You're an adult now. If you want Tom to be your real father, then you need to deal with the consequences of that choice." Lily's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the little girl she used to be, the one who would run to Jack with skinned knees and bad dreams. Then her expression hardened again. "I hate you," she sobbed. "I hate both of you." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. A few days after Lily's dramatic exit, my phone buzzed again. Another social media notification. With a sense of dread, I opened it. There was Lily, beaming next to Tom. The caption read, "Thanks to my amazing dad for funding my dream wedding. It's going to be the event of the century. P.S. Sarah, Jack, and kids don't bother showing up. You're not invited." I showed Jack, who just shook his head sadly. Where did Tom suddenly get all this money, he wondered aloud. I shrugged. Who knows, maybe he won the lottery. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. We tried to put it out of our minds to focus on our life and our other kids. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A week later, there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Martha and George, Tom's parents, looking worried and frazzled. "Sarah," dear Martha said, wringing her hands. "We need your help." I ushered them in, calling for Jack. Once we were all settled in the living room, George spoke up. "We got a call from the bank," he explained. "They're saying we've missed a loan payment. But we never took out a loan." The next day I found myself at the bank with Martha and George, piecing together a disturbing puzzle. Tom, it turned out, had taken out a massive loan using forged documents. He'd made his parents unwitting co-signers. "I'm so sorry," the bank manager said, looking genuinely distressed. "But unless the loan is repaid, we'll have to start proceedings against Mr. and Mrs. Johnson." Martha burst into tears. George looked shell-shocked. "We'll figure this out," I assured them, even as my mind raced. How could Tom do this to his own parents? Back at home, I filled Jack in on everything. He listened, his face growing grimmer by the second. "We need to call the police," he said finally. "Tom's committed fraud. His parents shouldn't suffer for his crimes." I nodded, my heart heavy. Despite everything, I never wanted it to come to this. The next few days were a whirlwind. Police statements, bank meetings, more tears from Martha and George, and then, finally, the news we'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure: Tom had been arrested. As the details emerged, the full scope of Tom's deception became clear. He'd taken out the loan not just for Lily's wedding, but to impress a new girlfriend. He'd been living large on borrowed money and forged signatures. "The funds have been frozen," the detective informed us. "We'll be seizing them as evidence." My thoughts immediately went to Lily. All that money she'd been bragging about, the lavish wedding she'd been planning, it was all gone. Fruits of a poison tree. That evening, as Jack and I sat on the porch, trying to process everything that had happened, my phone rang. It was Lily. "Mom," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Everything's ruined. The money's gone. The wedding's off. What am I going to do?" I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mix of emotions: sympathy, frustration, a tiny bit of vindication. But mostly I felt tired, so very tired. "I don't know, Lily," I said softly. "I really don't know." A few days after the phone call, Lily showed up at our doorstep. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the radiant bride-to-be she'd been just weeks ago. "Mom, Dad," she said, her voice small. I noticed she was calling Jack Dad again. "I need your help." We invited her in, sitting around the kitchen table where we'd had so many family discussions before. Jack's face was a mask of calm, but I could see the turmoil in his eyes. "The wedding's off unless we can find the money," Lily explained, her words tumbling out. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, can you help me? Can you give me the money for the wedding?" I glanced at Jack. His jaw was set, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to sweep in and fix everything, like he always had. But we both knew we couldn't do that this time. "Lily," I said gently, "we can't just give you the money. Not after everything that's happened." But Lily started to protest, but Jack cut her off. "We can't forgive you that quickly," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Actions have consequences, Lily. You made your choice, and now you have to deal with the fallout." Lily's face crumpled. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Ben is furious. He says I'm unstable, that I create drama. He's threatening to call off the engagement if we can't have the wedding we planned." My heart ached for her. Despite everything, she was still my little girl. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and make everything better. But I knew we couldn't. "Sweetheart," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. But this is a problem you created, and it's one you need to solve yourself." "We love you," Jack added, his voice thick with emotion. "But we can't bail you out of this. It wouldn't be right, and it wouldn't help you in the long run." Lily looked between us, realization dawning in her eyes. We weren't going to cave. We weren't going to fix this for her. "Fine," she spat, yanking her hand away from mine. "I'll figure it out myself. I don't need you. Either of you." She stormed out, leaving Jack and me sitting in stunned silence. Weeks passed. We heard through the grapevine that Lily and Ben had gotten married at the city hall, with just a handful of guests present. We weren't invited. The night we heard about the wedding, I found Jack sitting on the porch, staring into the distance. "I feel like I failed her," he said quietly as I sat down next to him. I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You didn't fail her, Jack. We raised her to be strong, independent, and responsible. Sometimes that means letting her face the consequences of her actions." "But what if we pushed her away for good?" he asked, his voice breaking. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Every person in life faces situations where they have to make a choice, I said softly. Sometimes those choices turn out to be wrong. That's what happened with Lily. But she's strong. She'll learn from this, and hopefully she'll find her way back to us. We sat there in silence, watching the sun set. Our family had been through a storm, and I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. But as I sat there with Jack, I felt a glimmer of hope. We'd weathered storms before. We'd weather this one too. 3 months after Lily's hasty City Hall wedding, I bumped into an old friend at the grocery store. As we caught up, she let slip something that made my heart skip a beat. I heard Lily and Ben are having trouble, she said, lowering her voice. Someone told me they're talking about divorce. I thanked her, my mind reeling. As soon as I got home, I filled Jack in. We debated for hours before finally deciding to reach out to Lily. To our surprise, she answered on the first ring. Mom, her voice was small, reminding me of when she was little and had a nightmare. Sweetheart, we heard. Is everything okay? There was a long pause, then a choked sob. No, Mom. Nothing's okay. Jack and I invited her and Ben over. The next evening, they sat across from us at the kitchen table, looking worn and defeated. We can't stop fighting, Lily admitted, her eyes downcast. Ben resents me for the wedding fiasco, for alienating all of you. His parents are furious that they weren't at the wedding. Ben nodded, looking miserable. I love Lily, but I don't know if love is enough anymore. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Marriage isn't easy, I started. God knows Jack and I have had our rough patches. But divorce, that's a big step. Are you sure you've tried everything? Lily burst into tears. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. For everything. Dad, Jack, I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I treated you. Mom, I'm sorry for trying to make you choose. I've ruined everything. Jack reached across the table, taking Lily's hand. You haven't ruined everything, sweetheart. You made mistakes, yes, but we all do. Have you considered seeing a family therapist? To our relief, they both nodded. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, for the first time in months. There were more tears, but also laughter, and by the time Lily and Ben left, I felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few months, Lily and Ben threw themselves into therapy. Jack and I even joined them for a session at the therapist's request. It was hard, dredging up old hurts and misunderstandings, but it was also healing. Slowly but surely we saw changes. Lily and Ben started looking at each other the way they used to. Family dinners became a regular thing again, filled with conversation and laughter instead of tension. One evening, as Jack and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily joined us. She snuggled up next to Jack like she used to when she was little. Dad, she said softly, I'm so sorry for everything. You've always been my real dad, and I was an idiot to ever say otherwise. Jack hugged her tight, his eyes misty. I love you, kiddo. Always have, always will. As for Tom, we heard through Martha and George that he'd received a suspended sentence for the fraud. Last we knew, he'd left town, hopefully to start fresh somewhere else. Life isn't perfect. Lily and Ben still have their struggles and our family is still healing. But as I sit here watching Jack and Lily chatting and laughing, I feel hopeful. We've weathered this storm, and I believe we've come out stronger for it. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about love, forgiveness, and sticking together even when things get tough. And by that definition, we are most definitely a family. I remember those days like they were yesterday. Mom, Dad, and me, Megan, the perfect little family. We weren't rich or famous, just ordinary folks living our best life. Dad worked as an accountant, always buried in numbers, but he'd light up when he got home. Mom was a teacher, spreading knowledge and kindness wherever she went. We'd spend weekends exploring the country, piling into our beat-up station wagon and hitting the road. Dad would blast his favorite oldies, and Mom would sing along, terribly off-key but not caring one bit. I'd sit in the back, rolling my eyes but secretly loving every minute of it. Those road trips were the best. We'd stop at dingy diners, ordering greasy burgers and sharing a giant milkshake. Mom would always steal my fries, claiming, "I'm just testing them for poison, sweetie." When we weren't traveling, we'd hit up the local mall. I'd drag them from store to store, trying on ridiculous outfits and begging for the latest toys. Mom was the voice of reason, but Dad was a softie. He'd slip me a few extra bucks when Mom wasn't looking, whispering, "Our little secret, Meggie." Friday nights were pizza nights. We'd order in, sprawl out on the living room floor, and watch cheesy movies. Dad would try to explain the plots, Mom would shush him, and I'd stuff my face with pepperoni, not caring about anything but the moment. I was 11 when Mom started feeling tired all the time. At first, we didn't think much of it. Teaching is exhausting after all. But then came the doctor visits, the worried whispers, the hushed phone calls. I didn't understand what was happening. Nobody told me anything, but I could feel the change in the air. The laughter became less frequent, the road trips stopped, and pizza nights were replaced with quiet, tense dinners. One night, I overheard Dad on the phone, his voice cracking as he spoke. "The treatments aren't working, Mike. I don't know what we're going to do." That's when I knew. Something was very wrong with Mom, and our perfect little world was about to shatter. I wish I could go back to those happy days, freeze time, and stay in that bubble of blissful ignorance forever, but life doesn't work that way. The storm was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For now, I close my eyes and try to remember the good times. The smell of Mom's perfume, the sound of Dad's laughter, the taste of Friday night pizza. Those memories are all I have left of the life I once knew, the life I desperately wish I could return to. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was pizza night, but there was no pizza, no laughter, no Mom. Just silence and the horrible beeping of hospital machines. "Megan, sweetie," Dad said, his voice cracking. "Mom, she's gone." Just like that, my world collapsed. Mom, my rock, my best friend, was gone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stood there, numb, as Dad hugged me, his tears soaking my hair. The next few weeks were a blur of black clothes, hushed voices, and casseroles I couldn't bring myself to eat. I kept expecting Mom to walk through the door, to tell me it was all a bad dream. But she never did. Then, about 6 months after we lost Mom, something changed. Dad started going out more. I thought he was getting better, until I saw her. She was tall, blonde, and nothing like Mom. Her name was Karen, and she had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Megan, this is Karen," Dad said, looking nervous. "We've been seeing each other." I couldn't believe it. Mom wasn't even cold in her grave, and he was already replacing her. Karen bent down, her face inches from mine. "Hi, Megan. I've heard so much about you." When Dad wasn't looking, Karen's smile dropped. Her eyes turned cold, calculating. In that moment I knew. This woman was trouble. Over the next few weeks, Karen was everywhere. She'd come over for dinner, watch TV with us, even try to help me with homework. But the moment Dad's back was turned, the mask would slip. "Listen, kid," she hissed one day when we were alone. "I'm here to stay. Don't get any ideas about messing this up for me." I tried to tell Dad, I really did, but he just shook his head. "Megan, I know this is hard for you, but Karen's a good person. You're just jealous. Maybe we should get you to talk to someone." Jealous? I couldn't believe it. My own father thought I was making this up. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a therapist's office, being told I had adjustment issues and difficulty with change. Karen had somehow convinced everyone, Dad, our relatives, even the neighbors, that I was troubled. Poor Megan, I'd overhear her saying on the phone. "She's having such a hard time. There are mental problems. We're getting her the help she needs." Then came the bombshell. A year and a half after Mom died, Dad dropped the news. "Megan, Karen and I, we're getting married. We thought it'd be best if you spent the summer at camp. Give you some time to adjust." But I knew the truth. They were shipping me off so I wouldn't ruin their perfect day with my sour face, as Karen put it. I left for camp with a heavy heart, knowing that when I returned, everything would be different. My home wouldn't be mine anymore. My family was changing, and there was nothing I could do about it. I returned from camp with a knot in my stomach. The house looked the same from the outside, but as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew everything had changed. "Welcome home," Karen said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We need to talk about room arrangements. With the baby coming, we'll need to make some changes." My head spun. "Baby? What baby?" Dad's face lit up. "That's right, you don't know. Karen's pregnant, you're going to be a big sister." Karen led me upstairs, chattering about nursery colors and baby names. We stopped at my room, or what used to be my room. "We've started converting this into the nursery," Karen said, pushing open the door. My heart sank. My posters were gone, replaced by pastel wallpaper. My desk had vanished, a crib standing in its place. "Where's my stuff?" I managed to choke out. Karen waved dismissively. "Oh, we moved you to the guest room. It's cozier anyway." The guest room was barely bigger than a closet. My things were piled haphazardly on the bed, some boxes still sealed. "This is temporary, right?" I asked, looking at Dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Well, Meggie, with the new baby." I got the message. I was being pushed out, replaced. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, baby showers, and me trying to make myself as small as possible. Karen's belly grew, and with it, her control over our lives. Then, one crisp fall morning, my little brother was born. Despite everything, when I held him for the first time, I felt a surge of love. For a moment I thought maybe things would get better. But Karen had other plans. "Careful, Megan," she'd say, snatching him away. "You might drop him. Or he's sleeping now. Maybe you can see him later." There was always an excuse, always a reason why I couldn't spend time with my brother. Dad was too busy with work and the new baby to notice. Years passed. I threw myself into school, counting down the days until I could leave for college. My brother grew into a sweet, curious kid, but Karen made sure our interactions were limited. Finally, my senior year arrived. One night I overheard Karen and Dad arguing. "She needs to learn responsibility," Karen insisted. "A job right out of high school would do her good." Dad's voice was firm. "No, Sarah wanted her to go to college. We set aside money for it. Megan's going." I'd never been so grateful for my dad standing up for me. When my acceptance letter came, I cried with relief. I was getting out. I was going to start my own life, away from Karen's manipulations. On move-in day, Dad helped me pack the car. Karen and my brother stayed home. "I'm proud of you," Meggie, Dad said, hugging me goodbye. "Your mom would be too." As I drove away, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. I was leaving behind the only home I'd known, and the little brother I never really got to know. But I was also driving towards freedom, towards a future where I could be myself without Karen's shadow looming over me. College was like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. Advertising became my passion, a world where creativity met strategy, and I could finally express myself freely. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, there was always a nagging ache in my heart. My little brother, barely 6 when I left, was growing up without me. During rare visits home, I'd catch glimpses of the amazing kid he was becoming. "Megan, look what I drew," he'd exclaim, showing me his latest masterpiece. I'd ruffle his hair, cherishing these brief moments. "It's awesome, buddy, you're quite the artist." Karen would inevitably interrupt, whisking him away for some urgent task or another. The distance between us grew with each passing year. Graduation day arrived, a bittersweet triumph. As I stood in my cap and gown scanning the crowd, I realized Dad and Karen weren't there. Later, a terse text arrived: "Congratulations on graduating. Dad, Karen." It stung, but I refused to let it dampen my spirits. I had a future to build. Thanks to my internships and portfolio, I landed a job at a hip advertising agency in the city. Grandma Mom's mom and my guardian angel helped me secure a tiny but cozy apartment. "Your mother would be so proud," she said, pressing a check into my hand. "This is for rent. She always wanted you to have a good start." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was challenging but rewarding. I made friends, went on dates, and slowly began to heal from the wounds of my past. For 3 years, I lived in relative peace, with only occasional, awkward holiday visits to break the calm. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. "Megan, it's Dad. I have some news. We've sold the house and bought a new place, bigger, more modern. I was hoping. Well, would you help us move? It might be a good chance for us to reconnect." I was speechless. After years of distance, this sudden olive branch felt surreal. "Karen would be happy to see you too," he added, though I doubted that. "And your brother? Megan, he's 12 now. He asks about you all the time." I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from more hurt, but another part, the part that still missed my family, that longed for reconciliation, won out. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll come." Great Dad's relief was palpable. "I'll text you the address. See you this weekend." As I packed a bag for the weekend, my emotions swirled. Hope mingled with anxiety, excitement with dread. Whatever happened, this visit would change everything. I just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. I pulled up to the address, my jaw dropping at the sight. The house was enormous, all sleek lines and modern architecture. It looked nothing like the cozy home I grew up in. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Dad opened it, a hesitant smile on his face. "Meggie, you made it." "Hi, Dad," I said, stepping inside. Karen appeared behind him, her smile as plastic as ever. "Megan, how? Nice of you to come," she said, her tone suggesting anything but. I looked around, expecting to see my brother. "Where's—" "Oh, he's staying with my parents for the weekend," Karen cut in smoothly. "We thought it would be easier to move without him underfoot." The look in her eyes told me everything. This was deliberate. She'd made sure my brother wouldn't be here, denying me even this small chance to reconnect with him. Swallowing my disappointment and anger, I forced a smile. "So where do you want me to start?" For the next few hours, I threw myself into the work. I scrubbed floors, arranged furniture, and hung curtains. It was easier than trying to make conversation with Dad or enduring Karen's false pleasantries. As I was sorting through some boxes in what would be the study, I came across a pile of framed photos. My heart stopped as I recognized one particular frame. It was a portrait of Mom, the one that used to hang in my childhood bedroom. Her smile beamed at me from beneath a layer of dust. Clutching the photo, I walked into the living room where Dad and Karen were discussing paint colors. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "why is Mom's picture in a pile of junk?" Dad's face fell, a mix of guilt and sadness crossing his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but Karen beat him to it. "Oh, that old thing," she said dismissively. "We decided those photos don't really fit with the new decor. They're a bit superfluous, don't you think?" Superfluous. The word hit me like a slap. My mother's memory, reduced to an outdated decoration. "Superfluous," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "This is my mother, your wife," I added, looking at Dad. Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Megan, we didn't mean." But I was already moving, gathering up every photo of Mom I could find. I found her old jewelry box, a few of her books. Without a word, I carried them out to my car, ignoring Karen's protests and Dad's weak attempts to explain. As I placed the last item in my trunk, I felt a storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger at Karen's callousness, disappointment in Dad's spinelessness, and a deep, aching sadness for the mother I'd lost and the family that seemed beyond repair. I slammed the trunk shut, the sound echoing in the quiet street. For a moment, I considered getting in the car and driving away, leaving this mess behind once and for all. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of Mom, her voice in my head telling me to be strong. Maybe it was the thought of my little brother who I still hadn't seen. Or maybe it was just sheer stubbornness, refusing to let Karen win. Whatever it was, I found myself walking back into the house. Karen was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding to avoid confrontation. Dad stood in the hallway looking lost, so I went back to cleaning, trying not to think about Dad's betrayal. As I was about to leave, Dad caught my arm. "Megan, wait. There's something else." I turned, eyebrow raised. "What now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We're having a housewarming party in a few days. We would really appreciate your help." Before I could respond, Karen swooped in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh yes, Megan, we could really use your assistance. Perhaps you could handle the catering? I'll take care of the cleaning, invitations, and overall organization." I opened my mouth to refuse, but Dad jumped in. "Please, Meggie, all our relatives and friends will be there. We can't manage without you." His pleading eyes wore me down. Despite everything, a small part of me still wanted to make him happy. "Fine," I sighed. "I'll help with the food, I'll even pay for it myself." Karen's smile widened. "Wonderful. We're thinking of an Italian theme. To christen the new kitchen." I nodded, an idea forming. "Actually, I know the best Italian restaurant. I'll order from there. Quality guaranteed." Oh, Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's the name of this restaurant?" Bella Notte replied, watching her carefully. She nodded, looking satisfied. "Sounds perfect. We'll leave it in your capable hands then." As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Karen's sudden agreeableness was suspicious, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Over the next few days, I threw myself into planning the perfect menu. I called my friend Maria, owner of Bella Notte. "Megan, it's been too long," she answered cheerfully. "Hey Maria, I need a favor. My dad's having a housewarming party, and I'm in charge of food. Think you can help me out?" "For you? Anything. What are you thinking?" We spent an hour crafting the perfect Italian spread. Antipasti platters, handmade pastas, tiramisu for dessert, the works. I spared no expense, wanting to prove I could handle this responsibility. After finalizing the order, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped this party might be a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal our fractured family. The next week dragged by slowly. I kept myself busy with work, but my mind often wandered to the upcoming party. I checked and double-checked the order, making sure everything was perfect. The day before the housewarming party, my phone rang. It was Maria from Bella Notte. "Hey Megan, I'm a bit confused. Your stepmother called yesterday and asked to move the food delivery to today. Did the party date change?" My heart sank. "What? No, it's supposed to be tomorrow." Oh, Maria sounded worried. "Well, I wanted to double-check with you before making any changes." I thanked her, my mind racing. After hanging up, I immediately called Karen, my suspicions on high alert. "Hi Karen, just wanted to confirm the party details for tomorrow," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh yes, everything's set for tomorrow at 7 p.m, she replied smoothly. "We're looking forward to it." I thanked her and ended the call, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. It was clear now Karen had tried to change the delivery date behind my back. She wanted me to miss the party entirely. Taking a deep breath, I called Maria back. "Hey, it's me again. I need to cancel the order," I said, my voice tight. "Cancel? But Megan, are you sure? It's a lot of food and it's all paid for." "I know. Keep the payment, consider it a gift. Use the food for the restaurant if you can." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The betrayal stung, but a part of me wasn't surprised. This was classic Karen, always finding new ways to push me out. The same evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my social media and saw my cousin was live streaming from the party. There it was, the housewarming in full swing, happening right now, a day early. I watched, a mix of hurt and anger building inside me, as Karen showed off the new house. She preened for the camera, pointing out design features and accepting compliments from guests. Suddenly a voice off camera asked, "Where's Megan? I thought she'd be here." Karen's face changed, a look of false concern replacing her smile. "Oh, Megan, She's always been a bit unsociable. Some mental health issues, poor dear. She said she couldn't make it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mental health issues? Unsociable? The lies flowed so easily from her lips. Karen quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation back to the house. Now, who's ready for some amazing Italian food? It should be here any minute. The guests cheered, and Karen beamed at the camera. Half an hour passed, and I could see the guests starting to look restless. Karen's smile became strained as she kept assuring everyone the food would arrive any minute now. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the live stream. Karen's perfectly crafted facade was crumbling before my eyes. Her smile had become a grimace as she dialed the restaurant's number, the speakerphone amplifying every word for the gathered guests. "Hello, Bellanot. This is Karen. Where is our food order?" The response was clear and devastating. "I'm sorry, Mom, but that order was cancelled earlier today by Megan. There won't be any delivery." Karen's face contorted with rage. "What? That little John," she shrieked, turning to my father. "Call Megan right now." Dad, looking flustered, pulled out his phone. I watched, heart pounding, as he dialed my number. When I answered, his voice boomed through the speakerphone. "Megan, how could you cancel the food order? You've ruined everything." Taking a deep breath, I replied calmly, "Dad, why did you change the date of the housewarming? Why wasn't I invited?" The room fell silent. Dad's face paled as he stammered, "We," Karen said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged meaningful glances, eyeing Karen and Dad with suspicion. Suddenly, Karen snatched the phone from Dad's hand. "You ungrateful brat," she screeched. "After everything we've done for you, you're trying to sabotage us, aren't you?" I let her rant for a moment before speaking, my voice steady and clear. "I think everyone can see now who really has mental health issues in this family. And it's not me." Karen's hysterical shouting filled the room, but I could see the damage was done. Guests were backing away, some already heading for the door. "I'm done being your scapegoat, Karen," I said firmly. "And Dad, I'm done watching you choose her over your own daughter. Goodbye." I ended the call and closed the live stream, my hands shaking but my resolve strong. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, all of it laid bare for everyone to see. In the days that followed, I ignored the barrage of calls and messages from Dad and other family members. I needed time to process, to heal. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "Megan, I'm so sorry," he began. "I've been blind. I let Karen control everything, and I lost sight of what really matters. Please, give me a chance to make things right." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but something in his expression stopped me. "It's not that simple, Dad. You abandoned me. You forgot about me." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want to change. I promise I'll do better. Please, Meggie." Slowly, cautiously, we began to rebuild our relationship. Dad started calling regularly, and we met for coffee every week. He even brought my little brother along sometimes, away from Karen's watchful eye. As for Karen, I heard through the grapevine that she'd become something of a pariah among the family. Her lies exposed, she retreated into a shell of bitterness. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my career, climbing the ranks at the advertising agency. My creativity flourished, fueled by the emotional turmoil I'd endured. I don't know what the future holds for my family. The wounds are deep, and healing takes time. But for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. I'm living life on my terms, pursuing my passions and slowly, carefully, allowing love back into my heart. As I look out at the city lights from my apartment window, I can almost hear Mom's voice. "You're stronger than you know," Meggie, she used to say. And you know what? She was right.
My name is Kate, and I grew up in a small house that always smelled of fresh bread. Dad inherited the family bakery from his parents, and I loved helping him knead dough after school. Mom was different. She was a realtor, always dressed in sharp suits and heels, bringing in more money than Dad ever did. Kate, come set the table, Mom called one evening. I was 12, gangly and awkward, more interested in reading than anything else. Coming, I shouted back, dog-earing my page. As I laid out the plates, I heard them start up again. Another slow month, John. Mom's voice dripped with disdain. When are you going to get your act together? Dad's reply was soft. Sarah, please, not in front of Kate. Oh, who cares? Mom snapped. She should know what a loser her father is. I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself not to cry. This was a common scene in our house. Mom belittling Dad, Dad trying to keep the peace. I knew Mom was angry about more than just money. She felt trapped in a life she never wanted. Kate, Mom barked, where's my wine? I scrambled to pour her a glass, my hands shaking. As I set it down, some splashed onto the tablecloth. Mom's eyes flashed. You useless girl! Can't you do anything right? Dad intervened. It's just a little wine, Sarah. No harm done. Mom glared at him. You're too soft on her. No wonder she's growing up to be just as pathetic as you. I fled to my room, burying my face in my pillow. I loved Dad fiercely, but I couldn't understand why he put up with Mom's treatment. As for me, I'd learned to make myself scarce, to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible. The next morning, I woke to find the house eerily silent. No smell of baking bread, no click of Mom's heels. I crept downstairs to find Dad sitting at the kitchen table, his face ashen. Where's Mom? I asked, though I already knew the answer deep in my gut. Dad wordlessly handed me a note. In Mom's elegant handwriting, it read, John, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving with Richard. He can give me the life I deserve, not this small-town nonsense. Kate, don't bother trying to find me. You're just dead weight I don't need. John, you're a loser, and you've turned our daughter into one too. Goodbye and good riddance. I stared at the paper, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Mom was gone. She'd abandoned us, calling Dad a loser and me useless in her parting shot. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Dad filed for divorce and petitioned to have Mom's parental rights terminated. I remember sitting in the cold courthouse, my sweaty hand clutching Dad's as we waited for Mom to show up. She never did. I zoned out as the adults talked, catching snippets like abandonment and unfit parent. When it was over, Dad squeezed my hand. It's done, Katie, he said softly. The divorce is final and your mother's parental rights have been terminated. It's just you and me now. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Life got harder after that. Dad threw himself into work, spending long hours at the bakery. Despite being only 12, I took on most of the housework. I'd come home from school, do my homework, then start on dinner and laundry. 3 years passed in this routine. Then, just after my 15th birthday, everything changed again. Dad came home one day, his face a mix of shock and grief. Uncle Pete died, he said, collapsing into a kitchen chair. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry, I said, hugging him tight. He hugged me back, then pulled away, his eyes wide. Katie, you won't believe this. He left me everything. Almost $300,000. I'm his only living relative. I don't know what to do with it all. But Dad figured it out quick. He invested a chunk of the money into the bakery, upgrading equipment and expanding the menu. Within months, our little bakery was the talk of the town. Dad hired more staff, extended the hours, and before we knew it, he was opening a second location across town. By the time I turned 16, Dad owned 3 thriving bakeries. Our financial worries were a thing of the past. I quit my after-school job and focused on my studies. We even took our first real vacation, a 2-week trip to Europe. As the years went by, Mom became a distant memory. Dad dated occasionally, but never seemed interested in remarrying. I didn't push it. We were happy as we were. High school graduation came and went in a blur of cap tossing and teary hugs. I'd worked my butt off and it paid off. I was headed to State University to study finance. The morning I was set to leave, Dad handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked, opening it to find a key. Dad grinned. "Your graduation gift. It's an apartment near campus. No more worrying about dorm life or rent." I stared at him, speechless. "Dad, I can't. This is too much." He waved off my protests. "You earned it, Katie. Now go make me proud." College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of the opportunity Dad had given me. When I wasn't in class or studying, I was interning at local financial firms. By the time I graduated, I had a job lined up as a junior financial analyst. My first day at work, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, straightening my laser. "You've got this, Kate," I told my reflection. "Make Dad proud." The job was challenging, but I loved it. Every bonus or raise I got, I invested rather than spent. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Money makes money, Katie. Be smart with it." Years passed. By the time I hit 32, those smart investments had paid off. I owned 2 more apartments in addition to the one I lived in, all bringing in steady rental income. Life was good. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Katie," Dad's voice sounded strained. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you about something." I found him sitting at his kitchen table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, fear clenching my stomach. He took a deep breath. "It's cancer, honey. Stage 4 pancreatic." The world tilted on its axis. "No," I whispered. "There must be some mistake." But there wasn't. The next year was a hellish roller coaster of treatments, remissions, and relapses. I spent every free moment at the hospital or at Dad's house, making his favorite cheese soup, even when he was too nauseous to eat it. One crisp autumn day, I arrived at Dad's house to find him sitting in his favorite armchair, a serious look on his face. "We need to talk, Katie," he said, patting the seat next to him. "The doctors gave me 6 months, tops." "No," I said, shaking my head furiously. "They're wrong. We'll get a second opinion. Well—" "Katie," he interrupted gently. "It's okay. I've made my peace with it. I'm selling the bakeries. Everything's going to you. You'll be set for life." I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "I don't want your money, Dad. I want you." He smiled sadly. "I know, sweetheart, but this is how I can take care of you even when I'm gone." The next 7 months were precious and painful. We talked more than we ever had about everything and nothing. I memorized every line on his face, the sound of his laugh, the smell of sugar and flour that clung to him even now. And then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, he was gone. The funeral was a blur. Afterward, I sat in Dad's empty house, clutching his favorite apron. The lawyer had already been by with the paperwork. True to his word, Dad had left me everything. I used the money from the bakeries to buy 2 more apartments. It felt right, somehow, building something lasting, just like Dad had done. A year after Dad's passing, I was just starting to find my footing again. Work kept me busy, and managing my rental properties gave me a sense of purpose. I'd settled into a new normal, or so I thought. Then came the call that turned everything upside down. "Kate, it's your mother. I'm back in town. I'd like to see you if you're willing." My mind raced. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect myself from the woman who'd abandoned me. But another part, the part that still held on to the little girl I once was, couldn't help but be curious. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let's meet at Rosie's Cafe tomorrow at noon." The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. As the clock struck 12, I saw her walk in. She looked older, of course, but still elegant. But she wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 17, trailed behind her. Mom spotted me and hurried over. "Kate, darling, you look wonderful. And this is Lily, your sister?" I felt like I'd been slapped. My what? We sat down, and Mom launched into her story, how her lover, Richard, had left her shortly after Lily was born, how they'd struggled to make ends meet, how she'd decided to come back to her hometown to start over. "I heard you have a rental property," she continued, her voice hopeful. "I was wondering if maybe—" She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. I looked at Lily, who was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. I thought about Dad, about how he'd always taught me to be kind, even when it was hard. I thought about the scared little girl I used to be, wishing for her mom to come back. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I have a unit that's just become available. You can stay there." Mom's face lit up. "Okay, thank you. We'll pay rent, of course." I held up a hand. "No rent, just utilities, for now." As we hammered out the details, I watched Lily. She looked so young, so out of place. I remembered being her age, feeling lost and alone after Mom left. "So, Lily," I said, trying to sound friendly, "you're what, a junior in high school?" She nodded, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Yeah, it's weird, starting at a new school for senior year." I felt a pang of sympathy, I bet. "Listen, if you need help with anything, school stuff, or just someone to talk to, I'm here, okay?" Lily gave me a small smile. "Thanks, That means a lot." As we left the cafe, Mom hugged me again. "You're an angel, Kate. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I hope we can start fresh." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to get a lot more complicated. But for better or worse, my mother was back in my life, and I had a sister. Only time would tell what that would mean for all of us. The months following Mom and Lily's return were strange. Mom quickly found work as a realtor, slipping back into her old life as if she'd never left. Lily enrolled in the local high school for her senior year. I kept my distance, unsure how to navigate this new family dynamic. Occasionally, Mom would call or stop by. "Kate, darling, thank you again for the apartment," she'd gush, her smile wide and seemingly sincere. "You've been such a blessing." I'd nod, uncomfortable with her effusive gratitude. "It's fine, Mom. I'm glad I could help." Lily and I developed a cautious friendship. I'd help her with math homework or listen to her college plans. It was nice in a way, having a sister, but there was always a barrier, the weight of the years we'd missed. Then came Lily's graduation. I attended the ceremony, watching from the back as she accepted her diploma. Mom beamed with pride, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine what life might have been like if she'd never left. The very next day, Mom showed up at my door unannounced. Her face was flushed, eyes blazing. "We need to talk," she snapped, pushing past me into the living room. I followed, confused. "What's going on?" She whirled on me. "Don't play dumb. I know about the apartments, Kate. All 4 of them." My stomach dropped. How had she found out? "What about them?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "You've been holding out on us," she shrieked, living the high life while Lily and I scraped by. I felt my temper rising. "Excuse me, you're living rent-free in one of those apartments." "That's not enough," she spat. "Half of those properties should be mine. I'm your mother." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was so absurd. "You can't be serious. You lost any claim to my property when you abandoned us. Remember? No parental rights, no child support." She changed tack then, her voice suddenly pleading. "Kate, sweetie, think about Lily. She needs money for college. If you just sold one apartment—" "Absolutely not," I cut her off. "Lily's education is not my responsibility." "How can you be so selfish?" Mom wailed. "After everything I've done for you." That was the last straw. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean abandoning me? Calling me useless in your goodbye note? Or wait, do you mean living rent-free in my apartment for months?" Mom recoiled as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, shaking with anger and hurt. How dare she? After everything, how dare she try to guilt me like this? I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I'd known, deep down, that letting Mom back into my life was a risk. But I'd hoped. Well, I wasn't sure what I'd hoped for. As the adrenaline faded, I felt a deep, aching sadness. This woman who should have been my protector, my support, was nothing but a stranger who wanted to use me. And Lily. God! What was I going to do about Lily? 2 weeks after Mom's blow-up, I was grabbing coffee at my usual spot when I noticed the barista giving me odd looks. As I waited for my order, I overheard a snippet of conversation from a nearby table. Can you believe it? Charging her own mother rent when she's got all those apartments? I froze. Surely they couldn't be talking about me? But they were. Over the next few days, I caught more whispers, more sidelong glances. It seemed Mom had been busy spreading her twisted version of events to anyone who would listen. Then came the Facebook post. I saw it during my lunch break and nearly choked on my sandwich. My daughter Kate has 4 apartments she rents out, making a fortune but refuses to help pay for her sister's college education. She's forcing me to pay exorbitant rent when I can barely make ends meet. I'm heartbroken that my own child could be so greedy and selfish. The comments poured in, each one a knife to my heart. How could she do that to her own mother? What a horrible person. I always knew there was something off about her. Friends, relatives, even old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them jumping on the bandwagon, shaming me for my supposed greed. Not one of them seemed to remember or care that this woman had abandoned me as a child. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my boss called me into his office. "Kate," he said, his face grave, "we need to talk about this situation with your mother. It's starting to affect the company's reputation." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Sir, I can explain." He held up a hand. "I'm not asking for details, but I need you to resolve this quietly and quickly. We can't have this kind of drama associated with our firm. Understand?" I nodded numbly, not trusting myself to speak. Back at my desk, I found an email notification about unpaid utilities for Mom's apartment. Great, just great. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. "What do you want?" she snapped by way of greeting. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, there are unpaid utility bills for your apartment. We agreed you'd cover those, remember?" She scoffed. "Oh, please! You're rolling in money from all those apartments? You can afford to pay a few bills." "That's not the point," I said, my patience wearing thin. "We had an agreement." "An agreement?" she interrupted. "Like the agreement that you'd help your family? Fat lot of good that did us." I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like the world was crumbling around me. How had I let things get this far? I'd tried to do the right thing, to be kind and generous, and this was how I was repaid. With a heavy heart, I made an appointment with a lawyer. "Ms. Stevens," the lawyer said, reviewing my case, "you have every right to evict your mother. She has no lease, pays no rent, and you've given her ample notice about the utility bills." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "What do I need to do?" He handed me a document. "This is an official eviction notice. Serve it to her, and if she doesn't comply, we can take legal action." Armed with the paper, I drove to Mom's apartment, my apartment really. My hands shook as I knocked on the door. Mom answered, her face twisting with displeasure when she saw me. "Oh, it's you. Have you finally come to your senses about selling an apartment for Lily's college?" Lily's picked out her school. Tuition's due next month. My shock turned to anger. "Are you serious right now? After everything you've done, you're still making demands?" Don't be so dramatic, Mom scoffed. It's the least you can do for family. That was it, the last straw. I thrust the eviction notice at her. Here, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. Mom stared at the paper, her face going pale. Then, without warning, she exploded. "You ungrateful little brute!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the apartment. "After everything I've done for you!" I stood my ground. "Everything you've done? You mean abandoning me? Spreading lies about me?" She lunged forward, her hand raised. I flinched, but the blow never came. Instead, she grabbed the front of my shirt, spitting insults in my face. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing but a selfish, heartless." I managed to break free, fumbling for my phone. "That's it. I'm calling the police." Mom's eyes widened, but she didn't back down. She continued her tirade, her words becoming more vicious with each passing second. When the police arrived, I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. I showed them the eviction notice, explained the situation as calmly as I could. "Ma'am," one officer said to Mom, "I suggest you calm down and discuss this civilly with your daughter." Mom sneered. "Civilly? With her? She's trying to throw us out on the street." The other officer turned to me. "Ms. Stevens, legally, this is a civil matter. We can't forcibly remove her without a court order. I'd suggest trying to work this out between yourselves or taking it to court if necessary." I nodded, feeling defeated. As the police left, Mom's triumphant smirk made my blood boil. "You won't do it," she taunted. "You don't have the guts to take your own mother to court." I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, but had never truly been a mother. In that moment, I felt something inside me harden. "Watch me," I said, my voice low and steady. Before she could respond, I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, I heard the slam of the apartment door behind me. As I drove home, I thought about what lay ahead. A court battle, more drama, more pain, but also, maybe, a chance to finally break free from the toxic hold my mother had over me. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt like I might throw up. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw Mom and Lily sitting on the opposite side. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, while Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. The proceedings began, and Mom put on quite a show. She wept dramatically, her voice breaking as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she sobbed, "my daughter has become so cold-hearted. She's trying to throw her own mother and sister out on the streets after everything I've done for her." I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. Then my lawyer stood up, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and confident, "I'd like to present some evidence that paints a very different picture of this situation." He proceeded to lay out the facts: Mom's abandonment when I was 12, the termination of her parental rights, her failure to pay any child support. He showed the judge the documentation of the rent-free arrangement and the unpaid utility bills. But he wasn't done. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Stevens is not, in fact, in the dire financial straits she claims." Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide. My lawyer continued, "Mrs. Stevens owns an apartment in another city, left to her by her former partner. She currently rents out this property for a substantial monthly income." The courtroom fell silent. The judge turned to Mom, his expression stern. "Is this true, Mrs. Stevens?" Mom's face had gone pale. She opened and closed her mouth a few times before finally whispering, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's voice was cold as he delivered his verdict. "This court grants the eviction. Furthermore, Mrs. Stevens will pay back rent for the month she occupied the apartment rent, free. Mrs. Stevens, your actions are nothing short of unconscionable. This case is closed." The gavel came down with a bang that seemed to echo through my entire body. It was over. We'd won. As we left the courtroom, I caught sight of Lily. She looked lost, confused, and my heart ached for her. This wasn't her fault. I walked over to her, ignoring Mom's glare. "Lily," I said softly, "I'm sorry it came to this. If you need help, real help, you can still reach out to me, okay?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Kate, I didn't know." I gave her a sad smile and walked away, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Mom and Lily moved out of my apartment. I heard through the grapevine that they'd gone to live in Mom's other property. I didn't try to contact them, and they didn't reach out to me. As I stood in the now empty apartment, memories of the past few months flashed through my mind. The hope I'd felt when Mom came back, the pain of her betrayal, the stress of the court case, but underneath it all, I felt free.